Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Council. Dennis Rogero, Chief Financial Officer. And thank you also for having me here today following on the mayor and her administrators for the recommended fiscal year 24 recommended fiscal year 24 budget. You see on screen the agenda. We'll begin by talking and expanding on that $1 million recommended increase. We'll move into our operating and capital budgets as we always do. And again, as we always do, an overview of our 5-year capital improvement and debt programs. So moving into an expansion of that $1 million increase, let me set that aside, if I may, for just a moment and give you an idea of where we're at right now. The city is very fortunate in many respects. Some of the last comments the mayor's made identified some of our strengths: economic diversity, which is what you want. It's similar to an investment. You want to hedge your risks in this area, in this area, in this area, and we're very fortunate that we can do that with all of our various revenues. You see on screen here a taxable value increase of nearly 12%. I'll take that every single year. That's fantastic. I remember when it was in the low single digits. Once that's taken into account, you see the revenue increase of just about $35 million. Once the Community Redevelopment Agency gets their portion of nearly $9 million, we net in the general fund a little over $26 million. That's very, very good, and I'm not going to say it's not. But the bad news is somewhat twofold. And you see here the continuing levels of service will leave us with very little remaining. When we're talking in the back, as we develop this budget over months and months and months, the continuing levels of service, and you've probably heard us refer to it as such, we call it the target budget, the continuing budget, the status quo. But you see here, in spite of the revenue increases outside of that additional mill, we can pretty much just keep up with what we're doing now. No service expansions. And you see the usual suspects. We've talked about them before. Pay benefits and pension increases. Many of these increases are closely tied with the inflationary environment that we're in. And I don't want to pin it all on inflation, but I'll pin a great deal of it on inflation. As we've shared with you in the past, we remain and historically have been percentage points higher in our local inflation than the national inflation. So to counter that, these pay, benefits, and pension increases to keep up with inflation, those are going to continue to cost us in fiscal year 24, candidly in fiscal year 25, 26, in perpetuity. They are recurring expenses. Inflationary increases to deliver services, you see that, we've talked about it before. You've recently seen significant financial resolutions that come before you during regular council meetings to account for these cost increases, including, of course, property and liability insurance increases. I think we're part of a big club nobody wants to be a part of. I know my insurances and costs are going up significantly, and we're no different from anybody else when it comes to that. So we've asked for a $1 million increase. And the usual suspects, again, we've referred to them as the 4 Ps, the 5 Ps, pads or housing, paving or transportation, public safety, parks and recreation. We don't have a P for vehicles, but hey, it goes with the 5 Ps. And I'll get into a little more detail on each one of these. But as you've heard the mayor say, and as you've heard me, or as you will hear me get into a little more detail, we are behind on any number of them. Oops. There we go. But before I tell you what that $1 million is going to get us, please let me go into a little bit of history, expand on a little bit of history that the mayor touched upon. This is from 1982 to our potential and recommended millage in fiscal year 2024. You hear a great deal of talk. I've said it myself many times. When we increased the millage in 2018 to 6.2076, that was the first millage increase we'd had in almost 30 years. And that's true, but that's only part of the story, the other part of the story, you see in red up there. We had reduced our millage twice within that 30-year period, and an additional homestead exemption of $25,000 was tacked on. At each and every one of those spots in red, that adversely affected, of course, our ability to bring in revenue. But it didn't just adversely affect our ability to bring in revenue and potential revenue in that year. It continued, and that's what you see with that red line. The difference between that bar chart and that red line is tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars of revenue that we have not recovered and we can't recover, staying with the millage we have right here. Moving into a comparison of millage rates with what are generally identified as our peer cities. You see Tampa, Orlando, St. Petersburg, and Miami. I am the first to admit it's difficult to do an apples to apples comparison with other major American cities. We've got a lot going on. We do a great many things. They've got a lot going on. They do a great many things. But I think you'll agree, and I would submit to you, it does show a very conservative millage history on the part of the city of Tampa. We're the lowest in each of those years, going back to 2017. And this is what we will get with that one mill. You see a significant revenue increase of nearly $54 million. The Community Redevelopment Agency again gets about $8 million, and the general fund will net almost $46 million. That's significant funding. And what does this mean for our portfolios, for the administrators and their agencies that came up to speak to you? Well, I'll go into that a little bit right now. You see in black, in the initial year, gets us about $18 million in transportation. And $18 million is not an insignificant amount of funding. But as you know, if we, and as we have continued our level of service, we are going backwards, and we're going backwards very, very fast. Decades and decades behind in our transportation needs, years and years behind in our public safety needs, whether it's vehicles for ambulances, fire engines, or as you heard Chief Tripp say, refurbishment and upgrades of our fire stations. So I would submit to you that the single year increase, and you see it on screen here, is not going to move the needle. Okay? And of course, we'll talk more about that over the coming weeks. What we've provided for you here is a 5-year picture to correspond with our capital improvement program of what will happen if we continue the apportionment more or less each year for the next 5 years. This is what they'll get. Again, not insignificant, and transportation, I think, is an excellent example, not going to move the needle. The numbers were so big that Gene shared with you, I've already forgotten them because we can't accommodate that need. But what we will share with you is the potential, and you've heard this word before, you're going to hear me mention it again, leveraging that money, leveraging that millage increase. Similar to the PIPES program that we've implemented, and I would suggest to you, and I think it's generally considered very, very successful. We've done a very good job with a 20-year, $3 billion project, getting the money in, spending the money, seeing the results. And what we did, if you'll recall, in the PIPES program was combine year-to-year cash and financing associated with debt service. And what you see here is a potential scenario to leverage that portion of the mill for transportation. So a combination of PAYGO, what we call cash, and financing. You see resurfacing sidewalks, et cetera. We've talked about that. Tremendous vehicle needs and grant matches. And we can end up with about $137 million. And I bring up the grants match because you see the $145 million on screen are grants that we have very, very high confidence that we're going to get, but we need that grant match to get them. You've heard Ms. Travis talk about lost opportunities with land acquisition, for instance, because we don't have the revenue available. You will continue to hear, in some instances, especially in transportation, about missed opportunities in federal and state funding for transportation because we don't have a dedicated revenue source. Our dedicated revenue source is basically the fuel tax for transportation, and it's woefully inadequate. So here's a scenario. Almost 200, or a little over $280 million for transportation. I would submit to you and the public that that will move the needle. What does this mean for public safety? Again, a little under $10 million in the fiscal year we're talking about, fiscal year 24 in black. A 5-year program across the board you see there, including financing and cash or pay-go. And again, these are one of the departments woefully behind on their vehicle replacement, their police sedans. That is significant funding once again. We have needs far in excess of that, though. So what can we do? I offer you an example here. Again, over a 5-year period, including cash, but bonding, of almost $124 million. In this particular scenario, fire station infrastructure and fire and police vehicles. I know we've got weeks of discussion ahead of us, and if and as priorities change, again, fire and police vehicles includes any number of police sedans, fire engines, ambulances. Those are very, very expensive assets. We've talked again and again at other meetings about the needs of our fire station infrastructure. We've got, as you heard Chief Tripp say, we got one out there over 100 years old. So as we enter into these discussions over the next few weeks, although the priorities may change either among these apportionments or within these apportionments, the amount of funding I'm sharing with you will not vary greatly. So in this example, again, a little over $123 million for public safety purposes. Again, I think that's going to move the needle. What does this mean for parks and recreation? You see here, in the current year, a little over the year we're talking about, a little over $9 million, and continuing across the board with little variation. Again, significant funding. This is of, I'll remind you, this is of that $45 million in additional revenue that we anticipate to get from that $1 mil increase. But this is what we could do with it. Again, a multi-year pay-go and financing example of over $135 million for capital projects, and like so many other things we're talking about, dire need for operations and maintenance. What does this mean for housing? A little over $10 million in additional funding for housing. You heard Ms. Travis speak to this a little bit. But you also heard her say and share with you not only the needs now, but the extensive needs that we're going to need over the next couple of years. We are anticipated to stay a fantastic city that everybody wants to come to, and that's great.
Mr. Rogero, this is an additional investment in housing.
Yes,
correct?
sir.
An additional 9 million, 9.8, 11.1.
Yes, sir, and I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. All of these are additional funding scenarios.
On top of our existing investment.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, thank you.
Yes, sir. So again, you've heard me say it with the previous slides. I'll say it again. Nobody, I think, anticipates this to move the needle. But as Ms. Travis mentioned, we can leverage that funding in both cash and financing for nearly $134 million. So it's going to cost money, of course. And what we have for you over the next couple of slides are average examples of homeowner impact associated with this $1 mil increase. We'll start right here. You see the averaged assessed value in the citywide, is just a little over $281,000. Once the homeowner takes advantage of, again, those two homestead exemptions of $50,000, their taxable value is a little over $231,000. That's the value of their property. From there, the annual adjustment is pretty easy, as you can see, $231.50. And over to the far right, the monthly adjustment, as you heard the mayor say, a little less than $20 a month. That's average citywide. And we'll go district by district. In District 4, you see the average assessed value of just under $482,000. Again, take it to the right, less the homestead exemption, and to the far right, you'll see the proposed monthly impact is 1 cent under $36. So for all intents and purposes, $36. And into District 5, the average assessed value of a little over $125,000. Taking it all the way to the right again, the proposed monthly impact be a little over $6 a month. And in District 6, again, the average assessed value, a little over $263,000. After the homestead exemptions, to the right, just a little under $18 a month anticipated impact for the average homeowner in District 6. In District 7, the average assessed value, $257,000, just under $258,000. And again, a proposed monthly impact of under $20, just a little over $17. That concludes my portion right now of the additional millage impact. The mayor asked that we expand upon that over and above the presentation that she and the administrators made. Now, as we typically do, we'll zoom out much, much wider to the budget in its entirety. And here it is, 1.9, a little over $1.9 billion. This is just over a 3% increase from the current year, fiscal year 23. And at the risk of belaboring some things we've already talked about, why the increase? Primarily service cost increases associated with inflation, whether it's higher salaries, healthcare costs, pension costs, deferred maintenance, and of course, the increasing contribution to the community redevelopment agencies. As we always do, we tend to concentrate on the enterprise and general funds, just about 3/4 of the entire budget, and we'll go into more detail as we typically do on the next few slides. And here are the expenditure categories for each of those funds. The general fund on the left, and you can see public safety, which includes police, fire, and code enforcement, little over half of the general fund budget in its entirety. Our Parks and Recreation Department, economic development, which includes the Tampa Convention Center, neighborhood and community affairs, and then a sizable chunk for central government. And these are the support agencies behind the scenes that keep the city running, whether it's technology and innovation, revenue and finance, human resources, purchasing, etc. On the right, the enterprise fund agencies that, again, we always talk about. I will remind council and the viewing public that these are the agencies that are anticipated and expected to run like a business. They are expected to make a profit every year and reinvest those profits into their enterprise, thus the name. And not nearly as many as agencies as you see on the left. You got the wastewater, water, solid waste, by far the largest, and then you see the parking department is also a business, as are the golf courses. And here we show two important drivers of our property tax revenue. The first, of course, on the right is just a little under $388 million in anticipated property taxes next year, with nearly $60 million of that going to the community redevelopment agencies. And on the left, as is typical, and as I don't anticipate will ever change, you can see that the property tax revenues that we receive by themselves are not sufficient, not nearly sufficient to cover just our costs associated with police and fire, which again is about half, a little over half of our general fund. I am happy to share this next this next slide, as I have been for the last few years, our general fund balance history. And I would be remiss, so I'm not going to be remiss. Thank you, Council, for your continuing support of these figures. It really is difficult for me to express just how important these numbers are. It's a significant metric, as we always say, of the city's financial health, and contributes a great deal to the wonderful rating agency figures that the mayor shared with you and that I will share with you again. As always, the amount increases as the budget increases, because as the budget increases, in order to maintain that ratio, the amount of money we have to set aside for our fund balance also increases. I'll remind council and the viewing public that our policy is 20%. You see that in red. I should really put that in green, I suppose. And that continuing increment above our policy is great news. But I do want to caution against thinking that's money that's free to spend. And here's why. Our policy is 20%. We consistently come in above that, and that's great. But as the market looks at us, as credit rating agencies look at us, honestly, they don't pay much attention to our policy. They pay attention to our history. And our history, for lack of a better expression, we have really identified a sweet spot there as the 23 to 24%, outside of 20 and 21, which were the pandemic era, where we received a great deal of federal and state funding. This consistency you see paints a very, very nice picture of the city's financial stability. You heard the mayor brag, thank you, Mayor, on our grants program. And I really want to brag on the departments, on my shop, on council, on the mayor, on all of those agencies that give us, as you heard Ms. Duncan say, other people's money, OPM. And you see here, we are on a tear. We've got a well-planned and integrated process within the city. It's only occurred within the past couple of years, and I think you see the results of that, as the mayor mentioned, nearly $140 million awarded. And not only is it well integrated and well thought out, but it's very ambitious. By the time this fiscal year's out, we will have applied for $230 million. And it's paying off. And of course, the caveat is, and as I always like to remind everybody, we're going to apply for $230 million. I guarantee you one thing, we won't get all of it, right? But as we expand the net and we make that net better, we really get more opportunity and help us help ourselves. And into the capital improvement program. Again, a 5-year program. We have fiscal year 24, the year we're talking about now, and the entirety of the 5 years summed on the far right, just a little under $1.7 billion. As you look through the capital improvement program, you will see it's very consistent with our current capital improvement program. The potential funding scenarios I shared with you earlier are not in this. It takes our capital improvement program right now and continues to implement the plan. No surprise, I would submit to you the big tickets are water and wastewater associated with our pipes program, solid waste. We've talked many, many times about their needs. Getting into a few more details on the projects, you see many of them, or you will see many of them listed here. Let's start with the big one, pipes, and all of those things that have continued to be in our plan, and I anticipate will continue to be in our plan. Clickers, there we are. And through to Parks and Recreation and the Solid Waste and Environmental Program Management Department. There's a mouthful. The Waste Energy Facility at the very bottom. Again, we've talked about that. We'll talk about it again. The East Tampa Recreational Complex at the top, the first bullet there. Again, more discussion coming with that. And I will share with you in the debt section some of our planned debt issuances associated with these projects. Moving into fire and the convention center and tourism, again, any number of fire station improvements and upgrades that are needed, along with these specific ones that are identified in the CIP. And we continue, of course, as you know, I think many are aware of the beautiful convention center that we've got down there. Many, many mobility projects, again, no surprise there. That is not only one of our greatest needs, but probably one of the subjects that we hear the most about, I'm sure, or I'm pretty confident council can say the same. And moving into, I won't read from the slide, but moving into the major fiscal year 24 and on projects within each district. Pardon me. You see the maps to the right. You'll find these interactive maps in the OpenGov program online, and there's both a link at the end of this program and a link provided on the city's main web page. I will say a little bit more about the comprehensive infrastructure for Tampa's neighborhoods. There's a title. In this particular instance, Virginia Park, you will see this in each district. These occur in all the districts because this is where water, wastewater, stormwater, and mobility come together to do a large project within the neighborhood, coordinated and relatively at the same time, so Department A doesn't come in, tear up the road, and make it good, and then Department B a year later comes in and tears up the road for something else. As you all are probably aware, we have experienced that in the past. So you'll see these on each slide with the particular neighborhood being affected. Extensive stormwater and street flooding work. The Build Grant and the West Riverwalk, you'll see that also on many of these slides. District 5, again, the East Tampa Recreational Complex. And again, the comprehensive infrastructure projects, the Build Grant and the West Riverwalk, and a number of fire stations. On to District 6. Excuse me, more of the same, and again, more fire station work. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention the Sulphur Springs Parks Improvements and Wellswood Church also. And in District 7, again, the neighborhood infrastructure projects, fire station number 13 and the Forest Hills Stormwater Pumping Station. These are just the major projects. And because it is so closely aligned with debt, I'd like to get into our debt program now. But before I do that, again, you've seen this many times before. You saw it recently in the mayor's presentation. But I would like to point out it varies a little bit from last year's, and I have the privilege of sharing with you that we have been upgraded once again. And you see that AA1 in green and underlined in January. Moody's upgraded our non-ad valorem revenue bonds to the second highest you can attain. Congratulations. That is due to your efforts, the mayor's efforts, our efforts. And when I say our, it's citywide. It really is a very, very strong team. This bodes very well for us as we anticipate going out for non-ad valorem bond debt within the next 6 months for any number of projects that I'll share with you in a minute. In summary, all of these ratings are high grade or better. You see at the top there, as I've pointed out before, the issuer credit rating. This is basically our personal credit score, our FICO score. On the far right, you see S&P, Standard & Poor's, has given us the highest rating possible, and that's AAA. Fitch and Moody's, the other two, have given us the second highest possible. So we are in very, very good shape. And these ratings, as I've said before, go hand in hand with all these big projects we want to do, because the better the ratings, the less money we have to spend in interest, so the more we can do. And costing us less is great, don't get me wrong, but these ratings, these types of ratings also reinforce the city as financially stable and financially conservative. I do always like to remind council and the viewing public that unlike probably most other city organizations, we are scrutinized 6 ways to Sunday, whether it's by outside independent CPAs, whether it's by these 3 credit rating agencies that you see, and they're all frequently reviewed and rated. They do what they call due diligence. They'll come in every year. We gave you this rating and it's great. Is it still worthy of being great? And so far they are. As I brag on these and congratulate you, I like to say, both out in the public and to city council, my opinion, the public and council and the mayor should expect nothing less than these fantastic ratings. The city does a very, very good job. So congratulations. And our principal outstanding debt. You can see our debt is on a decline in the years. That's a very good profile. Last payment right now in fiscal year 57. As always, the blue line is our governmental debt, which is separate and apart from our enterprise debt. Those enterprise agencies, water, wastewater, et cetera, they truly are run like their own business, and their debt is their own. We do not have an obligation for that. Should City Council decide to issue additional debt, and we will bring you those opportunities over the next 6 months to a year, then we will change this debt profile. This is the debt profile right now. But we like this profile. We always try to plan for this profile, and I have no impression that whatever we decide to do, our general profile will not change in terms of its trend. And as in the previous slide, the green bars are the enterprise funds and the blue are governmental. You can see again that our last debt service payment right now is in 2057. Nice, smooth, decreasing payments. I always like to brag. No surprises for any forthcoming councils, for any forthcoming mayors. So that's where we are right now. Again, as we always do, we'll share with you where we think we're going. This is the general government debt issuance. This will, in all likelihood, end in a non-ad valorem bond issuance, as we just discussed. About $170 million is what we plan for these projects you see right here. They closely mimic the projects that we shared with you, that our plan was last year when I gave this presentation, with the additions of the 3 last bullets on the right, Parks Master Plan projects. Again, council has been presented with that master plan. Transportation projects, and the Community Land Trust. I will note that last bullet at the bottom, the reimbursement resolution has already been adopted for most of these projects. And again, the reimbursement resolution allows us to quick start these projects by saying whatever we spend now, even though we don't have the debt, we can charge back to the debt once we issue it. It allows us basically to float our funding, start the project sooner rather than later, and pay ourselves back. And we've already taken care of that on most of these. And pipes. Again, in keeping with our anticipated plan, that might be redundant, in keeping with our plan, a little over $400 million split out among water and wastewater, as you see here. The reimbursement resolutions have already been adopted. As you see on the second bullet from the bottom, these will be long-term bonds, just as the first issuances of the pipes program have been. As you've heard me say before, in scuba diving, you plan the dive and you dive the plane, and that's exactly what we're doing and doing successfully in the pipes program. Solid waste, again, a significant issuance. We've talked about this before. Any number of projects under that debt issuance umbrella, the waste to energy program, or the waste to energy facility program we've talked about. We have recently found the property adjacent to the solid waste location at 34th Street, what they call the Cemex property. We have an opportunity to purchase that property across the street for $4 million. The extensive relocation of the solid waste headquarters, again from Spruce Street out to the main facility that we've talked about in the past, freeing up that land for any number of purposes, and then brownfield remediation. Again, the reimbursement resolution is ready for most of the projects. In fact, I think the only one it's not is that recent opportunity with the Cemex property. We anticipate we'll bring this to you later on this year, October, November. And as we've talked about in the past, a rate study is being taken up right now. That will lead to a feasibility study. Excuse me. As you know, we've outsourced that rate study to an organization that specializes in this type of thing. And it's really the first piece of that puzzle, because that will define, as the name implies, what is feasible to do in the feasibility report. What can we do with these rates? What can we do with these rates? And what do we anticipate the political and public appetite will be for those rate increases? So a lot of things going on behind the scenes associated with solid waste and their anticipated debt. And finally, stormwater, another big success story. I feel sorry for stormwater sometimes, because when we initially embarked on this program, it was big, and then the pipes program came, and now it pales in comparison, but it has been very successful right from the get-go. So my compliments to that team. And we still have about $36 million more to go. We have the reimbursement resolutions adopted already by council, and we anticipate, again, later on this year coming before you for those projects. There we are. And the budget calendar so far, I know there has been discussion about a budget workshop. We have none on the calendar right now. So what remains after this presentation today are the first two public hearings, September 5th and September 19th. You'll excuse the user error. I'm sure it's user error. There we are. As I wrap up the presentation, I will share with you again that this budget is once again presented with OpenGov on the internet. We continuously upgrade this platform. We just upgraded it. We are very impressed with it, and hopefully more and more people will be impressed with it as time goes by. You see the significant user enhancements that we've implemented. Navigation is much easier, accessibility, transparency. We have also, as council motion, and I believe a priority for Councilwoman Hurtak, we also have the PDF copy we'll make available on the city website, with the exception, and I apologize for that, of the capital improvements program. Right now, the CIP is just too extensive to lend itself to printing in PDF, but we'll continue to work on that. And I am the first to admit it took me quite some time to acclimate from the hard copy book. I did a budget book for 20 years, but I was compelled to acclimate, so I did. So hopefully you all find the transition less traumatizing. But it's a fantastic product. It allows us to continue to improve our performance metrics, not only when it comes to the finances, but across the city. I will remind council, of course, and the viewing public, we are a major American city. 49th, 50th largest. The budget is complex. It's very large. It's very complex. We appreciate your patience as you navigate through it, whether it's on the internet or in book format, and that's why we're here. Please let us help you. We offer training on the OpenGov platform, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, you're our customers. Let us know how we can help guide you through this admittedly large and complex budget.
Can you show that last slide so the public knows where to go?
Can you put that back on, please? Oh, here we go, I'm sorry. There you are. You're very welcome. And as I close this presentation, again, thank you for your patience. I know some of this is riveting, but it's all very, very interesting to us. I will remind, I'm very positive. I'm positive by nature, but as I've also shared with you that the city of Tampa, I think, has every reason to be positive. We are in a position that is the envy of so many other localities from a financial perspective. As we've discussed, we briefed all of you either this week or last week from a service delivery perspective, and I would submit to you from a customer expectation, from a taxpayer expectation perspective, we are not meeting our delivery metrics. We've all heard about it, transportation, et cetera, et cetera. But I remain very positive, but I would be remiss if I didn't share with you, and I'm sure you already know, we continue to be in a very challenging financial environment. I forget which rating agency it was, but they just, the second one now, out of the three major ones, just downgraded the United States government's finances. Never a good sign.
I was gonna say, we have better credit than the US government.
Yes, we do.
Yep.
Yes, we do. So, whether it's inflation, global, national, local, et cetera, we are on solid ground, and we're very fortunate, in my opinion. As we've discussed, we want to take that next step. We want to move the needle. But regardless how it turns out over the next couple of weeks, I truly appreciate y'all's efforts and willingness to listen. You all have a big burden and a big privilege. I think we all do. So thank you genuinely for all of your efforts, and we look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you very much.
And that's all I have. Thank you, Council.
Any closing comments before we go to 5-minute recess so CTTV can switch over? Councilman Carlson, I saw your hand. Why don't we wait to the budget workshop, or do you want to?
I have a whole bunch of clarifying questions, but I want to ask one in particular. And I want to thank the mayor for coming here in person and doing this. Mr. Rogero, on page 4, it says 11.7% increase. Every way I divide it, I get 16 or 17%. If you use the rollback rate, what is the rollback rate this year? Do we know?
I do not know. But
I think
can-
last
I
year was
can
like
have that-
5.9, so if it's something like that, then it's closer to 17. But if you just take 1 divided by 6.2, you get somewhere around 16%. But if you take 7.1 divided by 7.2, you still get 13 or 14%.
You're absolutely right, sir. The increase in the millage from the 6.2-ish to the 7.2-ish is about 16%. The 11.7% was our increase in taxable value. How much our taxable property in the city appreciated between last fiscal year and this fiscal year. And that increment, or that delta, is what drives the additional funding in the absence of a millage increase.
So the millage increase by itself is about 16%.
Yes, sir.
I have a bunch of other questions, but how do you want to handle it?
Are we gonna set a budget workshop?
Yeah, I'm gonna set, I'm gonna call for one on August 15th if we can, Tuesday.
Can I?
Can we do that now?
Can I just hit with two other quick clarifying questions?
All right, go ahead.
Page 8. I have a whole bunch of questions, but I'll just try to keep it short and ask them later. As I read this, Miami is up around 7.2. So if we increase to 7.2, then we'll be among the highest of our peers,
You are
right?
correct,
So
sir.
we're much lower now, but we're going to be on par, and that means we'll be ahead of Orlando and St. Pete.
Yes, sir.
Correct. And then on the debt, pages 41 and 42, I really would like to see the slides going back to 2010. I mean, it looks like we're going in the right direction with debt and debt service going down, but I'd like to see what it was before. Also, in the solid waste area, you talked about a line of credit. That's the first I had heard of that, but you and I had talked about the fund balance going down because of the deficit this year. I think we need to talk about that at some point as well. Also, I always say thank you to the mayor and you for focusing on fund balance. I think we ought to go back to 2010 on that also, so that we can see the comparison. The good thing is that I think that's page 27. We are, under Pamela Orio's administration, the fund balance was about 150 million. And it looks like this year we'll be back to 2010. Isn't that correct?
It'll be about 150 million we anticipate next fiscal year, so.
So she saved that much by 2010. That's after the Great Recession ended in 2009. And so now, 13 years later, we'll almost be back to what she saved during that time. So again, congratulations to everybody and thank you for that.
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, sir, so we'll offer you a fund balance chart from 2010 to fiscal year '24.
Yeah, I think,
Copy.
yeah, I probably my colleagues have talked to Mayor Oreo about this too, but during the Great Recession, I mean, she cut a lot of things, but she did a great job of being steward of the finances, and she found everything she could to cut. And I think she should get credit for having saved that much during the Great Recession. We're saving now during the boom times, and we're almost up to where she was back then. So I just wanted to make sure we thank her for that. Also, I wish there was a way that we could exclude the page 26, the CRA money, 8.6 million more to CRA. If you net out the increase, the 11.7 increase in tax rates, we're only getting about 26 million for this new tax. Correct. If my numbers are correct, because an additional 8.6 is going in the CRAs. And we're stuck because the public in the CRA districts doesn't want us to spend on infrastructure the city would have spent. But at the same time, then we can't spend it in the rest of the city. And that 8.6 million could be very valuable in the general fund. I wish Morris would help us figure out how to move that or not include it.
And again, full transparency, I want to make sure I'm clarifying between two particular increases in revenue. We have the increase in revenue associated with the increase in taxable value. That's about the 26 million. The Community Redevelopment Agency will get about 8 or 9 million from that.
Yeah, just to clarify, on page 9, you're including the, that 53 million includes the 11% increase in taxable value, right? So the net of that, it's on another page, I think, but the net of that is only like, it's a lower number than 46, I think.
Again, yes, if I can clarify, and we can provide a slide that identifies both. When we're talking about millage, we're talking two primary revenue increases. The increase associated with the taxable value, that's the 26 million. And then, as you said, Councilman, on slide number 9, this 46 million is over and above that. This is revenue confined solely to that one mill.
And then when you map out all these extra expenditures, by the way, thank you to the administration for listening to City Council's priorities, which we got from the community. That priority list is exactly what City Council's been asking for years. So they were spot on that. But as you look at the expenditures on all these things that we in the community want, do all these numbers though include that 11% increase in taxable value, or are you just amortizing out the 45 million?
It includes just the 45 million. And if I can back up briefly, and again, thank you. I appreciate the feedback, especially if we're going to have a workshop. That way we can be prepared to clarify some of these issues. But you've got the $26 million associated with the taxable value, and the CRA gets 8 of that. And then you see on page 9, you have the 46 million associated with the 1 mil, and the CRA gets 8 of that. We anticipate they would receive an additional 16 million in this scenario. Yes, so I want to make that clear because by coincidence, they both end up being very, very similar.
But it would still be 59 million total for
Yes.
CRA? Okay.
With the mill.
Yes, yes, that includes that additional 16 million. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Councilman Clendenin?
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, please.
One, I also want to applaud the mayor for coming today and presenting a proposed budget that is very reflective of, one, the wishes of council as I see them, but also the wishes of the people that live in the city of Tampa. Having just recently come out of a campaign and someone who campaigned strong on, as a citizen of Tampa for coming on 40 years, I recognize that our infrastructure is crumbling and that there's these unmet needs that have been, deferred maintenance and so many elements of our city. I heard it loud and clear on the campaign. I ran on this issue in the campaign to make sure that we do these things. So and I love what Ms. Duncan said, we need to start somewhere. You know, a lot of the times these things seem so overwhelming that, you know, it's like there's no fix to it. But, you know, somebody's got to do the non-sexy things, and some of this stuff is not sexy, and it's not some things that, some of this deferred maintenance is not something that you can put on a campaign flyer and run for reelection on, just like the bold project that the former council and the mayor did with pipes. You know, again, not a sexy thing, but a need for the city and a need for the community. It's something that I think we're doing very well for not just the current residents of the city, but the people that are going to be coming here, and my kids and my grandkids. So I applaud the city for coming forward with all of these maintenance items. I think the people that live in the city of Tampa have to really understand that our fire stations are in dire need of rehabilitation, that they are crumbling in areas. I mean, I think people would be shocked to see some of the conditions, the deferred maintenance in these fire stations. I think people would be shocked to find out that because of, you know, various things that have happened with the Great Recession and forth, that our police officers driving in cars that are, you know, we'd normally replace them every 7 years, but they're 14 years old. And I don't know how many people hold on to cars for 14 years old in normal driving conditions, but I guarantee they probably don't think that our police officers are doing that, and then the cost of maintenance because we're doing things like that. Fire trucks, I think the chief did a good job of talking about what our problems with acquiring fire trucks and making sure that we have those in emergency services. I really want to, I didn't hear, but I want to make sure as we bring it to the workshop, AVL and CAD for the fire truck department, to make sure that that is something that we are funding and that we're bringing that forward. I think it's really important for our first responders and to our citizens that that technology is available to our fire department.
Understood.
Also, the police chief, I am so happy to hear about his full support. It's one of the first meetings I had with him was on the police athletic league. I think that is a really important thing for the city to be doing. It's a hand up, and it's an ability to reach out to the community and provide something for the youth. And I applaud him for taking leadership in that. I'm looking forward to supporting that type of initiative. So thank you so much. 192 parks. We own a lot of property, and we have not been maintaining that property. You know, so, you know, I think people, when they see some of the bells and whistles of some of the new infrastructure we've built, they don't realize, one, how it got built and what money it got built from. So you know, it's not, you know, like Julian B. Lane is an example. You know, a lot of that came from that BP oil money. It didn't come from us. It was other people's money, right? But there's a lot of parks in our neighborhoods that nobody's touched in years. There's broken picnic tables. There's no picnic tables at all. There's no benches at all. There's no nothing. But you know, these are little gems that bring communities together if we improve them. So I think that it's something that we as a community, I think our citizens expect us to be able to do that. And you know, if you own property in your own personal life, you know you have to maintain what you currently have. And we are woefully behind. I think this is a bold step forward in ensuring that we meet the needs of the citizens of Tampa, and that we were doing the right thing and good custodians of our positions and the people's money. So I thank you all and all of the staff for bringing this forward. And I think we have some room to talk about how we shift stuff, how we shift funding in this scenario. But you know, I think that can be done in workshop, and as we push forward through this, as we make sure these projects move forward. I look forward to implementation. I look forward to working with council to get a good budget forward and really do well for the citizens of Tampa.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Vieira, then Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I took a lot of notes, and I'm not going to get into all of them, but I do have some initial impressions, and I explained those to the administration, still have those very, very strongly. A question, Mr. Rogero, I wanted to make sure, if I recall, from this tax increase, 20% goes to public safety. Am I right? Okay, so 20% goes to public safety. Okay, yeah. So just
In fact, again,
go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It
21.
might be 21.
21.
But yeah,
Okay,
thank you. Yes.
más o menos, as we say.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so 21%, et cetera. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's incumbent on all of us as council members and as representatives of the community to speak to the community on the different issues that are here. Like I said yesterday, not everything is black and white. There's a lot of gray, and this budget obviously has a lot of gray. There's a lot of good things, but there's always offsets. Nothing is free. One of the things that I looked up during this budget presentation is millage rates in other cities. Take a look at a lot of South Florida municipalities, they're in that 7 level. And as Councilman Carlson pointed out, we'll be reaching up to that level. We have to be very judicious. Inflation right now is 7.3% in the Tampa Bay area, more than double what the national rate is. So again, I think we have to have a good talk with the public on that gray. I've said many, many times before in the past, I support a millage upward rate adjustment for public safety. I do. I think that's very, very important. From what I see in this budget, there's a lot of upgrades to facilities, particularly with Tampa Fire, 30 new police officers. That's wonderful. I don't see in year one anything for a new station, particularly for downtown Tampa, something that I think council has spoken about many, many times. That's part of what we talk about in having a public safety master plan. So again, there is a lot to work out there. There is a lot to work out there. I do support an upward millage adjustment, particularly for public safety. I've come out before for transportation in 2016, 2018, 2022. So that's not an unreasonable dialogue to have. But I think we have a lot to talk about, especially with the public on these new obligations that we're going to be taking on. Again, there's not a lot of black and white things in life, particularly in politics. There's a lot of gray here. So I think that we have to talk about that. But again, that level of 21% on public safety, I think is something that this council should certainly look at, particularly given our very acute police and fire needs. I think that's something that's very important. I think the public supports paying a reasonable amount more for public safety. They've talked about it more for transportation and other issues. I've spoken more about parks and additional revenue, and my belief that we shouldn't be asking for additional revenue for parks. That being said, I'm one of 7. And there's compromise in here, and that's how good legislation and good budgets get done. But I think we have to have a very vigorous discussion on that, and so I'll shut up at this time. Thank you.
Councilman
Thank you,
Brandt.
sir.
Thank you. Well, if he's 1 of 7, I'm 2 of 7. But anyway, what I'm saying is this. When you look at the future and you look at what you're doing and try to accomplish, there's some things that come to mind. The future is that somewhere along the line, yourself or chief of staff or the mayor with the council going to have to figure out where you're going to get the monies when you don't have any gas tax decreasing because the electric cars are going to come in. What is the other governments doing to make sure that the electric cars pay their fair share of using the roads and giving part of that money to the city? And number one. Number two, the CIT tax, the last bite is 2026, but that'll figure now to that at the end of 2026, it'll zero coming in. So that's another thing that you use for money for infrastructure. When you come around and you look at sustainability, this city has the area where you can really turn things around if you get some money from not only the Fed but other monies to make sure that every drop of water that we have in the canals are sustainable for the future, including those that you have in the reservoir that holds 1.2 billion gallons of water. By putting solar on top of those areas and the canals, you solve 2 problems. First, a decrease of 10% of loss of water to evaporation. And secondly, you gain the sustainability for the future of the world. And I heard me right when I say the world. It's not about Tampa. It's been the hottest July in the world, not only in Tampa. It's been the warmest in the world, not only in Key West, where the water degree there was 100 degrees. We must prepare for tomorrow because today's thinking is not going to make success in the future. That's number 2. And number 3, I agree with everything the council members have said. And if I read this right, the property taxes collected is $387 versus the police and fire expenses of $357. That's the first time I've seen the property tax collection of the city be greater than the expenses of the fire and police department combined. I believe last year it was $20-some million the other way around. We are making some headway to make sure that the public is protected. People don't come here because they like you or me or anyone else here. They come for education. Do you have that? Yes, we do. They come for security from a great police department. Yes, we do. They come for safety. When you're in the home and you call that 911 and the fire department shows up, that sick person feels 100% better just looking at the people coming in to take care of that person. So they've made, I don't know how many, 800-some thousand calls, or 88,000 calls if I recall, and those are the things that we offer as service. Everything costs more. What I like to see from 2010, as was mentioned before, what was the cost of something in 2010, doing business with the city? What is it today? So that the public can get a real fine idea of what it costs to run a government. Yes, price of eggs have gone up. Yes, they've also come down. Milk, the same way. Everything that the public has to do to make a living has almost doubled. And I can tell you, one day I'm gonna start Charlie's Corner and talk about everywhere I go and the prices of everything. And let me warn you of one thing, those are of my age that are listening. Don't believe the people that send you something that they wanna buy your house and they gave you a quote. They're using you as a sucker for you to buy that house. It's always $80,000 to $100,000 less than the real value of the house. I'm more concerned about those things because the people that I know are getting hurt, and I see that quite often. But what I'm saying is I want to scrutinize the budget even more. When I read this, 87 to 57, I said, my God, this is the first time and ever, if it's factual, I assume it is, that the property taxes are more than it costs to run the police and fire. But thank you very much, and we'll make a decision here. I'd like to have it, when it's finished, I'd like to make a request for a special call meeting on August the 15th at 5:01.
Second that, yeah.
All right, we have a motion then to set that special call hearing August 15th at what time?
At
So
5:01,
Tuesday night.
Tuesday night, right, August the 15th, Tuesday night at 5:01.
I can't do it that night.
I think I don't, my aide is watching, I don't know if it's August 15th, but let's,
I can do it the 24th, but I can't do it the 15th, unfortunately.
yes, Mr. Shelby?
Just for clarification, Councilman Miranda, that is a special call workshop, is that
Right.
correct? Thank you.
Do the 22nd?
Can you do during the day, or no?
I can do just about any other time, but not that.
Not that day at all?
I can do the 24th is a Thursday, right?
Tuesday.
Yeah, we're
22nd.
trying to do it Tuesday. That's the 15th
Yeah,
is a Tuesday.
22nd I can do it.
Is
That's
the
fine.
22nd?
Lisa, do I have anything on August 15th?
22nd, we're looking
No,
at
22nd. Huh?
Can we make that motion later? I just need to look
Yeah,
at
it's
the calendar. I
fine.
just want to get my
Yeah,
calendar.
I'll look at our.
Let's,
calendar.
let's take a when we take our 5-minute recess, I just need to see the calendar. Councilwoman Hurtak, you had
Thank
a.
you. Yes,
So, yeah.
I want to start by looking at the millage rate comparison when we talked about Tampa and Orlando and St. Pete and Miami. Miami does have the highest, and this would bring us toward Miami. The one thing we aren't considering is that most of those other counties have a transportation tax that we don't have. Penny for Pinellas, they're able to fund their transportation needs.
That's
And
true.
we simply aren't. And we don't have the ability to create, the county is not gonna do it. So when we consider it, yes, we are gonna have a millage increase close to those, but those folks are gonna have taxes above that they are paying toward transportation that we simply aren't. Unfortunately, that also enables visitors to pay that tax. But again, that's out of our hands. We, just so the public knows, we aren't allowed to make those increases. Those have to go through the county. So we aren't allowed to create a tax for ourselves for transportation. So this is our tax for ourselves for transportation. To go further looking at transportation, certainly during that workshop, I do want to hear a little bit more about, we're looking at putting 39% of this mill increase into transportation, which would be paving and streetcar expansion possibly, and I would love to hear a little bit more about that. Public safety, I think, has been covered for now. Obviously, Parks and Rec would want to hear more on. But the one thing that nobody's talked about that, of course, I want to bring up is housing, and 20% for housing. What I would like for that department, for Ms. Travis and her department to bring back, we had that really beautiful graphic, and I don't have it in my budgets this time, showing the different buckets that money would go
remember that,
into. So I think the public would like to see what's the total amount we could put toward housing. And the really important thing that she hit on that I want to talk about even more is the fact that if we have a dedicated funding source like this, we really can go after those dollars. She told me recently in the last couple of days that there were 2 motels that we could have bought. We just didn't have the money. Yeah, I mean, that's immediate housing. Then those are large parcels that we could turn into multifamily housing. I was crushed when I heard that.
Missed opportunities, yes.
Yeah, missed opportunities. And so, like, when you talk about that CEMEX plant, that I was immediately interested, because one of the things the public keeps talking to me about is that waste to energy facility. It's great that we're renovating it, but what happens when we have more people as we expand, because we're going to be at capacity? How do we expand that capacity? And I have to tell the public, we just don't have any more, there's not any space. That CEMEX plant could help with the possibility of space further down the road. So the ability, not only do we have this great buffer that we talked about, we're going to have 150 million that we just have sitting in the bank that help us, borrow money, but we need the money for those missed opportunities, because that's the one thing that the city of Tampa, we are hemmed in. We have nowhere to grow. We have water, or we have the county. And we're not annexing. So where do we go? Once our land is gone, it's gone. So anything we can do to buy land or to reutilize the land we have is so critical. So that is my favorite part of this budget, the ability to look forward. And I do, again, want to thank the mayor and her administration for coming and presenting such a bold vision for the city. I greatly appreciate it. I think the presentation today was very clear. There's a lot of questions, and I can hear it already, obviously, from just us, so I know the public will have that as well. And I want to thank you, Mr. Rogero, for working hard to get that PDF available of the general fund money, which is about 640 million. Did I get that right? Somewhere in that
Something like that.
ballpark? So I just want to say thank you for that, because that's the area of the budget that is really malleable for us. That's where we can move money around the best. The other money is pretty much spoken for. So in a $1.9 billion budget, it's really 640 million that we really get to look at. And so for that to be available for the public so that they can see where all that goes, in a PDF form. I will warn people, it's about 350 pages, I think you told me.
Yeah.
So it's still probably something you want to view on the computer, but I just really do appreciate that, and I'm really looking forward to whenever we can put this workshop together. I would absolutely ask my colleagues, though, to make that a night meeting so that more people could attend. And thank you.
Councilwoman Henderson.
Yes, and Chief Herrero, thank you so much
Yes, ma'am.
to the mayor and to all of the staff that worked so hard to present this to us today. This is my first budget hearing. I actually was really excited about it. These numbers are just huge, and I know that we're thinking about the future as we ask for this millage increase. One of the things that I would like to see and hear is the mid-level projects. I know that you listed the primary ones, but I feel like there's a lot of dollars still involved in mid-level projects, so I would like to know those in more detail. And also even to break out, as I had in the discussion with you all at staff, was the anything that is supporting our youth outside of parks, regular parks and rec, but our PAL program, our East Tampa Summer Program, as well as summer employment programs. We have an opportunity once those numbers are presented, as I said to you, to involve public and private partnerships to support our youth. We have to start thinking beyond just what the city is responsible for. There are plenty of organizations and corporations who do very well in this city that we can ask them, other people's money should also be incorporated into some of the decisions that we make so that the city doesn't have to have the burden, but yet we're still thinking about the future generations. So great job on the presentation.
Thank you.
I can tell that you all did your homework, and the PowerPoint slides were very simple to understand. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I'll wrap up before we take this 5-minute recess. Thank you very much for the presentation and for the mayor coming out. Councilman Miranda brought up a couple of things that I wanted to mention, and one of them is the CIT runs out right around the corner.
Yes, sir.
And with the last two sales tax proposal increases that have been shot down essentially, what confidence do we have, what guarantee do we have, although the CIT tied in stadiums and others, a stadium and other things, what if that doesn't get renewed? What if we don't have that funding source come 2026? Our city is growing, our city is changing. We talked about deferred maintenance, we talked about the quality of our roads. Most importantly, housing. That is not going to get better. We need to continue the investment. That's something that we heard loud and clear. That was probably the biggest, if not the biggest topic through the campaign over the last several years is housing. We need to continue the investment there. We talked about the quality of our roads. That's one of the biggest complaints I get is the quality of our roads. We need to address that. And again, without these dedicated funding sources, as Councilwoman Hurtak mentioned, other counties have those dedicated, Penny for Pinellas, our neighbor, they have it, we don't. And so we need to look at different alternatives in order to continue those investments in the future and meet those needs. I look forward to looking into this budget. I know it's very large. Thank you for putting it online and providing it to us electronically. So having said that, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Please check your calendars. When we get back, we can decide on a date for this workshop. We'll take this into further discussion. So we're in recess for 5 minutes, and we're going to start back up with public comment. Thank you.